If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you. Another fascinating car in the Nick Begovic collection is this 1974 Maserati Bora. The Bora is named, as many Maseratis have been, for a wind. In this case, a wind which blows in the Adriatic Sea. And the Maserati Bora was also the example of a wind which blew across the Alps, from France to Italy, because this car was built during the period in which the company was owned by Citroën. That alone is a very interesting story, more of which we can get on to later, but Maserati has a very interesting and storied history. Like many sports car manufacturers, the Maserati brothers were absolutely brilliant engineers and great racers, but they weren't very good businessmen. They sold the company they had founded in 1914 in Bologna to the Orsi family in 1937. The Orsis, based in Modena, soon moved the company there and established Maserati as a championship race car builder. After the war, of course, they realized that they had to build passenger cars, much like Enzo Ferrari realized he had to do it in order to support the business, and they began to produce cars in serious numbers for the first time. But even that actually wasn't the basis of an ongoing business concern, and the Orsi, being very smart and capable businessmen, soon found their resolution in an alliance with Citroën. In 1968, Citroën was looking for a partner to develop an engine and build an engine for their upcoming Citroën SM Supercar at the top of the range. They were noted for building very advanced cars, but not very good and interesting engine builders. So they were smart and turned to Maserati, known as engine builders. The V6 engine that Maserati developed for Citroën, which would power the SM, was a version of the Maserati V8 engine that was already in production. The Bora was the first mid-engine car to come from Maserati, who heretofore had only built conventionally configured front-engine, rear-drive cars. But the Bora was a great step forward for the company because, again, what they did is, using their parent company's hydraulic technology, the Bora was the first car in production with adjustable pedals. The seats, incredibly comfortable chaise longue, were fixed in place, but you could adjust the pedals and the steering wheel to fit the drivers, and it also featured that no-travel brake pedal, like the Citroën SM, but without using the button. It had a conventional brake pedal, but there was no travel in it. The hydraulics took care of it all. This is also, shockingly enough, Maserati's first car with all four-wheel independent suspension. So the Bora was really the first modern Maserati in many, many, many respects. And the car is also very glamorous with this brushed aluminum roof and these wonderful flying buttress rear glass over the engine compartment. It really is a car that screams 1970s, looking forward, looking very fast, looking very capable. This particular car is also interesting because it also shows another great feature of the 1970s. And I love this so much. Inside the car, we can see that it's equipped with the ultra-glamorous and ultra-up-to-date Blaupunkt Berlin radio on a stalk for ergonomic efficiency, where you can easily reach all the controls for the tape player and the radio controls, and the tape player also allowed you to record. There's actually a microphone in the car for dictating, a high-speed express office. It's no wonder that the Bora appealed to Nick Begovic as both an aesthete and an engineer. It's a cleverly designed car, cleverly executed, and brilliant to drive.
So the Bora's running again.
Yeah.
Back on the road.
Back on the road. So I'm here with Wayne Carini, and you had this car for a little bit, and you really went through everything and got it back up to running shape again.
Yeah, well,
which was nice.
It was a project that before they put it away, they blew a head gasket, and all the antifreeze was left in the engine and in the exhaust system, and it just corroded everything on the inside. And so we had a lot of work to cleaning up the inside of the engine block, and then we powder coated all that just to make sure that it was right. And then they had set everything to try to lean out the fuel mixture as much as possible and readdress the timing to get it through California emissions.
Wow, okay.
And I think that had a lot to do with the head gasket blowing.
Yeah.
And then once that was done, we put it back together and then found out that all of that had been done. So it was kind of a tedious job, but I'll tell you, these cars, they get get a bad rap because people let them go, and then they start leaking fluid on the hydraulic system, which is nothing more than a Citroën hydraulic system in these cars. And then, of course, the carburetors get all gummed up. But I'll tell you, when one of these cars is dialed in, like we've got this dialed in now, it's a fabulous car.
I remember reading about these as a kid and finding it pretty interesting how it was kind of the combination between Citroën and Maserati, and I believe they call that Franco-Italian, which was pretty interesting. I know the French and the Italians don't always get along, but I guess they got along with this project. But I remember seeing this car when it arrived at our storage facility in Virginia, and the first thing that I really noticed was the sheepskin that were covers that were on the seats. So seeing these freshly restored seats with this beautiful leather is quite a change from the last time that I saw it.
Well, they tried to keep the car as original as possible, and the seats were just started splitting at the seams, and rather than take them apart and fix them, they just put some covers over them and said, you know, it hides the problem. And you know, the problem with these cars were they fell into disrepair, and then a lot of them just became an old car that nobody wanted to buy and fix because financially they were not worth a lot of money, and so a lot of them just got left in garages and outside.
Yeah.
And but to find one that is totally dialed in like this car now, and to be able to drive it and understand what it's like, what it was like to buy a brand new one.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to give me, and I love Ferraris, but if I had a choice in this era to buy a Maserati Bora or a 308 Ferrari, there would be hands down.
Really?
No problem. I'd buy this car any day. Ferrari's great, but this V8 engine is so smooth.
Yeah, it does seem really smooth.
A lot of nice power. It's a ZF box.
Yep.
So ZF boxes are just great.
And the engine doesn't seem really overbearing. Like, it's very quiet here in the cabin. This would be a great grand touring car that you could take across the country and really enjoy a lot of back roads with.
I'll bet you this car will probably go 130 miles an hour all day effortlessly.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I like the design of it too. I mean, it's very much of its time in the 70s, but it's a very interesting design, and I think that over time, I think it's aged pretty well.
It really has.
Compared to maybe some of the other cars that came out during the same time in a similar class.
It's stainless steel roof, really great accent, and these seats, I don't think you can get a better Italian-looking design seat in a car than this.
It's also, they're very comfortable.
They are.
I mean, you could do a long trip in this and be perfectly happy with that.
Yep. Well, the car is really a nice car. Again, they had the Merak, which was the V6 car. I think that really dragged this one down a lot because everybody thought it was the same kind of a car. And Meraks are great little cars too. Again, if you get one that's really sorted out, really done well.
You've mentioned that a couple times about making sure that it's dialed in. I think that's kind of with everything. I mean, as long as you are regularly exercising a classic car, really any car in general, it's going to be...
Makes all the difference in the world.
It's going to make all the difference, and it's going to be running fine. I think a lot of times when they sit for too long, hence with this, it's when things start to go wrong.
Listen, if you don't live in a house for a year or two, it just deteriorates.
Exactly.
And it's just that, I don't know, it's not so much upkeep as it is if people are living in it and cleaning it and doing all that stuff. But if you walk away from it, turn the heat down, the house falls apart. Same thing with a car.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, a car's not used to, especially a car of this era, if it had to be in a cold environment where in a garage out in the back of somebody's house with no heat, the metal contracts and expands, and then the heat doesn't do it. us living beings much pleasure.
Yeah.
And visual pleasure as well as experiencing driving.
Well, I think a lot of times with cars itself, I think a lot of people will think of them as a materialistic item, and I don't really think of cars as that way. I think that cars have souls, and I really enjoy being around them, and I don't consider them a status symbol or anything like that. I truly love all different kinds of cars and everything that they can do, and that's what I think is fun, at least with classic cars, because they seem like they have more soul than some of the newer stuff.
Well, most cars built of this era, they weren't appliances. They were an extension of your personality.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them weren't great cars, but yet they did sort of tell the story of the driver.
This is a fun little road up here. It sounds really good. It sounds more like it doesn't, like you mentioned the 308 before. That's more of a high pitched sound, whereas this is more almost like an American V8. Has a more of a low tone to it.
What's amazing is that the antifreeze sat in that exhaust system for years, and of course that antifreeze is oily. It's a lubricant, and maybe that's what saved it. But that's the original exhaust system still on this car. We didn't touch it. We cleaned it inside.
That's incredible.
Flushed it out. We heated it to get all the fumes and all the stuff out of it. But that's about it.
Well, I think what's so great about Nick Begovic is he really kept these gems just locked away, and they were mostly preserved in his garage, and we were fortunate enough to acquire the collection a couple of years ago.
So here's the hill of despair. So on the vintage car rally, I made it right to about here. And,
oh, really?
And people had stopped for some reason right up here.
No,
and
yeah.
I had to slow down so much the car, little Oldsmobile, just wouldn't go anymore. We coasted down the hill, and that was the beginning of my demise.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit warmer today than it was during the vintage car rally, that's for sure. It was cold that day. I was actually out of work because I broke my collarbone, so I wasn't able to make it, but I happened to walk outside and I said, I'm glad I'm not filming today.
Yeah. It was a little chilly. At one point we were way out in the road, I don't know, it wasn't that far from here. We were going up a hill and a jogger passed us.
Oh, yeah, you know you're going slow.
And a jogger passed. He ran right next to us and talked to us for like 2-3 minutes about the car and stuff. Said, okay, I gotta go, guys, see him. Whoop, off he went.
How was it over the Mount Hope Bridge?
We made it.
You made it? Nice.
We made it. We made it one way. So when we got there, the shifting clutch mechanism had broken.
Yeah.
And we couldn't go any further, so we just put it on a flatbed and brought it back. Yeah, but this car is a joy to drive. Of course, what it takes is going through every component.
Yeah.
The brakes have been gone through, all this stuff, and a good set of tires. Nothing like a great set of tires. Yeah. These are Blockley radials, and we use these quite often.
I think that's
you can feel how smooth.
Yeah, very smooth.
It is.
Well, that's the thing with modern cars is, you know, everyone you talk about like the Carrera GT, right? And how much of a death trap that car is. But if you put that car on modern Sport Cup 2s, take a left, it changes the characteristics of it. And I think my generation, especially with being fortunate at a young age to drive some pretty cool cars, I don't think we realize how good we have it with the tires, because the tires when you were a kid and the tires for me now, very different and much more accessible.
High-supply tires, they were fun to smoke the tires, but other than that, you couldn't go around a corner. You hit a rut in the road, the car would go its own way.
think that this, it's funny, you look at the production numbers of this car, I think it was less than 600 or something like that. And nowadays, a manufacturer will come out with a special edition of their car, and it'll be limited to a couple thousand units. I think people don't realize how rare a lot of these cars are. Yeah. And especially to find one like this in good condition and to be brought back to a really nice running condition is it's a pretty rare car, I would say. Yep. Definitely the most rare car that people will see today, and they probably won't even realize it while we're driving it around here in Middletown.
It catches some eyes, that's for sure. It's low and it's sleek looking.
Well, thank you for getting the car ready for us.
Yeah, I think it goes good.
Yeah.
You know, I think we could maybe, after driving in some bumpy roads, we might have to do a little shock absorber work maybe over the winter, but other than that,
our roads here in Rhode Island are a little bit worse than they are in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I didn't hear any of that back there, but you know, the fuel pressure, I mean, the oil pressure is great. It doesn't overheat. It sounds good. The brakes are fantastic.
Yeah. It seems like everything is really dialed in, and it's pretty exciting to see the before and after. Yeah, she purrs. It sounds great.
Smooth.
Yeah, it's really smooth.
So we're on the road in Nick Begovich's 1974 Maserati Bora. And as somebody who knew Nick Begovich, Jay, I think that he would be awfully pleased that his wonderful car was back under its own power on the road.
Yeah, I mean, he was a wonderful collector. I mean, everything he has is original and unrestored and in beautiful shape. I mean, this looks like, I don't know, a 1,500-mile car, and it's probably not much more than that. Is it? What is it?
13,000 miles.
13,000 miles, so he drove it. And this has to be one of the most misunderstood supercars. Here you have a car that, is it a rival for a Miura? I don't know, but it's mid-engine. It's the V8, it's not the V6. It has all Citroën hydraulics. It's got the best of both worlds. If the best of both worlds is Italian electrics and French hydraulics. It's just a car nobody knows, nobody's ridden in, and yet they're still relatively inexpensive.
It is an extraordinary thing to me, Jay. The Bora is one of my favorite cars of the period, designed by Giuseppe Giugiaro.
Right.
I think one of his absolute masterpieces. It speaks to the period without seeming dated.
Right.
You know, this is they started manufacturing these in 1971. They manufactured them until 1977. This is sort of right in the middle of the production run. And you talked about, you know, riding in these cars. One of my favorite things about the Bora are these extraordinary seats.
Right.
That are very much, I won't say, they're certainly not racing seats, but they're designed to hold you in place.
Right.
They have spectacular thigh support because they're really long, and they're fixed in place so that the pedals actually are movable.
Right.
To make you comfortable as a driver. And again, thanks to the Citroën connection at this point,
And they're very
Maserati
French.
was owned by Citroën. Yes, Maserati was owned by Citroën at this
Right,
point.
and it's funny that with French cars, we don't think performance, we think luxury.
Right.
And most French cars, even the lowliest Peugeot, rides beautiful over rough roads. They're wonderful cars, but you don't think of them as high-performance cars as you would a Ferrari or even a Maserati. So it's like, oh, they teamed up with Citroën? What's that going to get them? Well, I mean, you get the excitement of a 4-cam V8 with the unique hydraulic system of suspension and braking with the French Citroën, and yet nobody knows about these. And they don't seem to garner a lot of excitement or attention. They just kind of came out, didn't set the world on fire, although they were very good.
The Bora sold actually very well
Yeah.
when it was new. I believe it actually outsold the contemporary Ferrari models at the
Really?
time. Yeah,
But unknown almost today.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of those things that for a lot of people, the Citroën connection was the scary part. They thought,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's so mysterious. What's going to happen with these cars? But of course, the Bora does not have a Citroën suspension. It
Oh,
just
it
uses
doesn't?
it just uses the hydraulics for the brakes,
Right.
for the adjustment of the pedals,
Right.
and so. But the suspension tuning, I think, is very, very, very much informed by the Citroën connection, because this certainly rides like no other Maserati GT car.
Right.
And the fact that these are very complex cars, but as I said, they're easier to own today than they were perhaps when they were 10-year-old used cars.
Right.
Because of the resources. It's sort of interesting that with the exception of the two Pegaso Z102s, which are at the time we're filming this still under restoration, and which were bought from the Begovic collection as restoration cars, projects in progress, this is the last of the Begovic cars to be recommissioned for the road. And it proved to be the most daunting of the
Really?
of the resurrections, yeah.
Why is that?
Because it was unfortunately parked with a blown head gasket.
Oh.
And so the engine was a bit of a mess. And then you have to do all of the things. What a great sound. You have to do all of the internal work to the engine before you can refit it
Right.
and test the hydraulics, etc. And parts availability is sort of shockingly limited for the 4.9 liter cars. This had a small crack in the crankshaft,
Yeah.
and there are no 4.9 liter crankshafts still available.
Wow.
But again, a 4.7, slightly reprofiled, does the job fine.
Yeah.
God, this car handles beautifully. Ha! This is a great car. And so our friend Wayne Carini and his shop F40 Motorsports did the resurrection work on this.
Right.
And the result, while it took a long time to finish, is I think very satisfying.
Trying to think of what other mid-engine supercars were around. There was the Dino, although hardly a supercar.
Right.
There was the Miura. A couple of not roadworthy or not road-sanctioned Ferraris that were.
Alpines.
Yeah.
This is a. Trying to remember actually when the 365 Berlinetta Boxer was introduced. It did overlap with the Bora, but again, there's the whole discussion about 12 versus 8.
Yeah, and I used to get the Bora mixed up with the Merrick, and that was a 6. And
Right. The Merrick
fact that-
shared the 6 with the Citroën SM.
I just wonder why I didn't know more about it, because it didn't seem like there was much information on them at the time. There was your usual road test and car and driver and road and track, and that was about it. I never saw them advertised. I never saw them raced.
No, these are never raced.
I never remember seeing them in films. The Longest Yard had Burt Reynolds with that
Right.
SM, and
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of the Bora is a terrific car whose light was sort of hidden
Yeah.
under a bushel. And of course, there are all these wonderful period touches in this car, like this wonderful Blaupunkt radio,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
one of my favorites. There for the convenience of it being on the stock, so you have all the controls at your hand. Plus, of course, it's a a 3-band radio with, as well, a cassette player that was also a recorder. So it's got a little microphone
That's funny.
Next to it, so that the executive on the go, dashing across a continent,
Right, of course.
could dictate a memo.
Take a note, Miss Reynolds, you know.
And that just typical, you know, you're a Maserati owner, your wonderful 3500. There is a way with both the 6s and the 8s that the Maseratis just sort of deliver power in this very smooth way, almost an American way, you know?
Right.
There's power from down low all the way through. The red line on this is 5,500, and it's got a genuine 200 mile per hour speedometer. It's not a 200 mile per hour car, but it's certainly a car that was designed to go at least 140. Just feel that torque right there in the mid-range. It's just absolutely fabulous. You might have to go Bora shopping.
Huh?
You might have to go Bora shopping.
Yeah.
I think as an accompaniment to the fact that Nick Begovic, because of his admiration of Hans Lidwinka and the Tatra, loved mid-engine and rear-engine cars. And so it's no surprise that, you know, at the same time he could go to his garage and choose between driving this, the Pantera, the Miura.
Yeah, I just don't understand why there wasn't more excitement about this car in the day.
Yeah.
Is it seen as a touring car more than a sports car? I don't know what it is.
I think that was probably a bit of it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, Maserati hadn't, by the time this car was introduced, hadn't been on a racetrack for a decade.
Yeah.
So, you know, the whole racing connection really wasn't as vivid as it would be for a Ferrari. And I think that's a shame. 'Cause this is definitely a car that you could just drive in for hours. The way it just eats the pavement, you know? It's very, very impressive.
It is
I'm,
impressive.
Curious to get your
Yeah.
thoughts of the car behind the wheel. If I will ever get out of the
I know.
driver's seat.
I was just thinking that myself.
Just revs the red line.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great. It
Yeah.
drives great. I just want... You'd think this would be a $500,000 car.
It should be in a just world.
Just how fickle and how much publicity plays a role in the car's value.
Yeah, that's how the market works. You know, we've had a lot of fun through the years on the Assess and Caress segment on Jay Leno's
Right.
Garage, because we discuss exactly that. What is the car itself?
Right.
And then how does the market react to it? Because the market doesn't always find the best in what they celebrate. So begrudgingly, I'll give you a bit of a
Yeah, I'm
moment
anxious to
behind the
give
wheel.
this a try, see what it does.
It just winds up power.
Yeah, it really does.
It just winds up power in this, you know, I guess the cliche would be like a turbine, you know?
Right,
just
yeah.
this continuous thing. Sound is wonderful.
Oh yeah, it sounds wonderful. I wonder if the Citroën part just made people think of it as having a soft head. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Not
no,
being
absolutely.
hard, you know, not manly enough, as they used to
Exactly.
say in the old days, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's a wonderful driving car. And the French always, not necessarily race cars, but just wonderful road cars, just so comfortable. And this is very, very comfortable. The seats are incredible, different than anything I've ever sat in before.
Yeah.
And even though it's 50 years old, it still appears contemporary.
The design is absolutely timeless.
Yeah, you could build this today and get away with it. I mean, it's so much more sophisticated than the Miura and better trimmed, I think.
Yeah, it is designed, we've had discussions before about sort of what is the actual aim of the build of the car? Is it a sports car? Is it a GT car? This is a GT car.
Right.
And it's designed for comfort and speed in an effortless way. You don't want to.
Is it just so light, or does this have a power steering?
Oh, it's got power steering. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it does have power
That's
steering.
got the Citroën.
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I thought you had
absolutely.
seen.
Not the suspension, but the steering, braking.
Yeah.
Yeah. A good friend of mine had one of these and took it on a lot of 1,000-mile rallies, and I
Right.
could see why. It's just
Yeah.
a thing for climbing mountains and.
And
just,
the 4.9, that's a big engine, especially by European standards.
yes,
And about what, 3.25 horsepower?
3.25 horsepower, and
Which, when you realize that the biggest thing you could get in '74 was the Pontiac SD 455. That was what, 290 or 310 horsepower.
Exactly.
And this weighs a lot less. But you don't think of this as a supercar, That's what's so odd.
it is it is a bit of a question mark when you think about the mid '70s and performance. We all think that performance wouldn't come back to the world until the late '70s and the Porsche 930 Turbo. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of very usable performance still around the mid '70s if you knew where to look.
I mean, this has almost the same horsepower as a Ferrari Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's 325, 320. I mean, yeah, it does. Why is it not in that same class? Is it marketing? Is the fact that they never...
Well, first of all, there's the mystique of Ferrari.
Right,
The brand
right.
mystique. Same with Aston.
Right.
It always slightly annoyed me. I'm a big fan of Aston Martin and a big fan of Maserati. And when people would refer to Aston as the English Ferrari, no, it's the English Maserati.
Right,
They
yeah.
had those wonderful straight six engines,
Right,
and then
right.
the V8s. So it was very comparable to Maserati. They weren't V12s.
I agree with
they
you,
weren't. They
yeah.
weren't Ferraris. And so I certainly think that Maserati should sell for a similar price as competing Aston. That's
Right.
for sure. And you think about this and sort of the Aston Martin V8, which came slightly later than this car was built,
Right.
but roughly contemporary.
Right.
And this is a really fascinating alternative to that. Nick Begovic certainly had great taste in cars.
Yeah. I think of the Maserati as a masculine car,
Mhm.
and this as a more feminine car. Not in an insulting way. I don't know what it is about it.
I mean, think of the Ferrari as a masculine car.
A Ferrari masculine car too.
Yeah.
But this does everything a Ferrari Daytona would do, but a Ferrari Daytona is $500,000, $600,000,
And the Ferrari Daytona also is a wonderful car, but it really demands that you be on it all the time.
Right, and that, no power steering, no power brake, that requires a lot of effort. This is pretty effortless steering.
Yeah. And the braking is remarkable. Nothing beats that Citroën hydrodynamic assisted braking.
Yeah.
It gives you security that you just don't have in a lot of other cars. I'm lost for words. I know that you find it hard to believe,
I do
but
find it hard to believe.
but it is an amazing thing, and just to be able to bring this car back to the road in celebration and honor of the collecting achievement of Nick Begovic is something that is absolutely terrific.
Right, and when you realize if this, like the Aston, had a theme song, it would be a $2 million car.
Yeah.
It's really how you market it, how the public perceives things, Like whenever I meet kids, they think a DeLorean is really fast. And
Right.
It's just a horrible car. It's a terrible car. But because it was in that movie, it's got this mystique that it's something unique and special,
Well, Jay, I think that for our next project, you and I should do a movie that stars the Bora. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be a big hit. Yeah.
Hey, get Shirley Bassey to sing a theme song, and we're all set.
Well, she's certainly old enough. Did you see her at the Academy Awards last year?
No, I didn't.
I mean, age 90, I guess. she came out and sang Goldfinger. I mean, perfect.
No, yeah.
I mean, just amazing.
She is
Just
she is
amazing.
a force of nature.
Yeah. I mean, you thought, oh, she's gonna be an old lady kind of, Goldfinger.
Yeah,
No. She was,
Not our Shirley.
she was good. I can almost put a throw to your exhaust on this.
I don't know. I like it. You know what? The reason why is that, again, when you put your foot in it, you get that entertainment.
Right.
But if you're just cruising for an hour,
Right.
it's just enough. I won't say background sound because it's not a background sound. It's very much a foreground sound, but it's not so in your face or in your ear,
Right.
as it were. So I think
Maybe that's the problem with this car, why it did not do as well. It wasn't hard edged enough. You know, you didn't see it. I don't know. I just remember I got all the magazines, and this didn't seem like an exciting one in the way it was presented. I don't know why. You know, the French never did any advertising.
No, and it's also this car lasted through the end of the Citroën ownership and
Right.
the beginning of the De Tomaso ownership of Citroën, of Maserati rather. So there's also a lot going on. That
We remember the
really
story
got
of the
that.
Motor Trend editor. He picked the Citroën SM as a car of the year.
Yes.
And he got fired because Citroën did not advertise. Because usually you get Motor Trend cars, then, Motor Trend says,
Right.
And Citroën said, oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We
We'll
don't
put the plaque in our office in
Yeah,
Paris,
yeah.
and au
Right.
revoir.
Right. Thank you.
Well, Jay, thanks so much for sharing the return to the road of this wonderful Begovic collection car.
Yeah, it is amazing when you think of what this car was in 1974. It would have been one of the fastest cars on the road.
Absolutely.
And those are the days when 300 horsepower was considered just unbelievable.